Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Great, thank you. So we're going to get started in a couple of minutes. So one thing I would like to ask everybody, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't signed in, please do so. There's 2 sign-in sheets at each of the entryways. Feel free to grab some cookies and water. That's important housekeeping. Oh, and I would also ask if anybody has laptops or phones with microphones to disable them if they could, because it picks up the signal in the room and we'll get feedback on these microphones. So I believe, are we ready to get started, everyone? Okay. Well, again, welcome. My name is Dr. Greg Kramer. I'm the Superintendent in Parks and Trees and the Tree Warden for the Town of Greenwich. And this is our first kickoff meeting related to our master plan for Pomerance Tuchman. And we have our GZA team here who I'll introduce very shortly. Tonight, I'd like everybody to kind of give the feedback that they feel they'd like to express. There's no good or bad feedback, it's just feedback. So I want this to be an open forum for discussion and thoughts and ideas, because that's how we develop really good plans. And from there, team will take all that information and start to develop a plan. So right now there is no plan per se, but there is some ideas. And again, this is an open forum to express those ideas. So I would like to introduce our team who's here today. Stephen Lecco is the principal in charge in planning for GZA. He's been with the organization for 35 years in planning and permitting and environmental analysis of natural resources and management projects. He specializes in land use planning, trail assessment and planning, wetland assessment, and environmental impact evaluations, as well as federal, state, and local permitting. Mr. Lecco has been involved with numerous large-scale planning efforts throughout the Northeast United States with a focus on Connecticut, where there's a broad knowledge of many technical elements that allow him to successfully manage large-scale, interdisciplinary, and complex projects. Next is Daniel Shaw. He's our project manager and point of contact. Dan has been a project manager and primary point for contact during this process. He's a registered landscape architect who's created landscape designs for a range of clients, including architects, municipalities, and state agencies, to name a few. Dan's background has given him a broad knowledge of design, public spaces, parks, trails, playgrounds, and waterfronts. His knowledge in green infrastructure, resilience planning, and natural and built environments to promote health, ecology restoration, and planning at both neighborhood and regional levels. Dan is a collaborator and a communicator with skilled in participatory design and public speaking and will actively involved in a community engagement process. He's an active listener, making interactions with the community and comfortable and positive progress. To my immediate left is Cece Saunders. She's a historical documentation specialist. She's the principal in historic preservation since 1982, has served as a principal investigator and primary author and public manager for numerous cultural resource projects. She's met professional qualifications for the National Park Services. Ms. Saunders currently serves as the governor's appointed member of the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Review Board, a position she's held since 1993. The board is also for reviewing and editing statewide National Register nominations before transfer to the Department of Interior and National Park Services. Working in Connecticut urban, rural, and waterfront sites, Ms. Saunders has directed a full range of projects that encompasses archival research, archaeological evaluation, and field investigations, structural assessment, visual impacts analysis, master plan development. She's also unique prior experiences having served for the Town of Greenwich Conservation Commission. And also with us tonight is Cora Antavania. She's an ecological scientist. She's helped out in ecological site visits in the park with staff. Her background is in biology with a degree in environmental management. She's worked with a range of clients, including local Connecticut towns, state agencies, involving projects focusing on trail maintenance, ecological assessment, and living shorelines. So that's our team from GZA. And then I also would like to introduce some of our staff here on board. We have Dan Carlson, who's our Assistant Park Director, and Darren Wigglesworth, who's our Park Operations Manager. So without further ado, I believe we can get the presentation started. So Dan, if you'd like to take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Greg. Just going to start sharing my screen. Thank you all for coming out. Can you all hear me all right? And thanks to anyone listening at home on Zoom. So we're here to talk about the Pomerance and Tuchman site here in Greenwich. It's a town-owned pair of parcels that is used as a public open space for passive recreation and has been in town ownership at this point for a couple of decades. And it saw an uptick in use around 2020, and the need for a long-range vision for the plan to manage it going forward was highlighted during that time. So this project is to create an overall guiding vision for the Pomerance and Tuchman site. So this is a map showing the project area. The Pomerance parcel is the larger one that's to the west, and the Tuchman parcel is the slightly smaller one to the east. They together comprise just over 100 acres of open space. And the significance of this as an open space is not only its size and the resource that it offers, but also its connectivity to other parks in the neighborhood, as well as its being walking distance from the center of Coscob and neighborhoods where lots of people live. So as I'm sure you know, it's a valuable resource for those reasons. Where we're currently at is we're creating this master plan, and we're at the stage right now where we're not drafting recommendations or anything like that yet. We've been working on background research, site investigation, historical research, and now we're here to present background information about the project and the site with you all, and to have a discussion in the second half of the evening tonight to get your ideas, your thoughts, your experiences of how you use the site. And we'll be recording those ideas so that we can reflect those in the recommendations that we're going to produce for this project. So that's what this slide here summarizes. This is where we're at in the scope of the project. So in bold there is where we're at now. The next steps after there's this public meeting, simultaneous with this, there's an online survey that's been launched. And so far we've had a lot of participants. I think we're already up to 500 responses on it. It poses a range of questions about how you use the Pomerance and Tuchman Park, what you see as the priorities there. And, together with the discussion that we'll have tonight, we're taking that feedback into account as we then move on to the next step in the coming weeks of starting to draft initial recommendations for the master plan. So when we get to that stage, there will be a second public meeting. It hasn't been scheduled yet. It may be in December, but we'll post that when it's been planned. And at that point, we'll share preliminary ideas that we've started to draw together as a project team for some further discussion and feedback on that. And then we'll finalize the master plan after that. So to give a little background, we'll get into the history of this really interesting pair of sites, but they were purchased by the town in 2000, starting with the Pomerance parcel, which is 75 acres. And when the town acquired that piece of land, they put together a committee to look at what the best use for as a public resource this could be. And the Pomerance Planning Committee in 2001 recommended to keep the land used as open space protected for passive recreation. And their recommendations included a few modest site improvements which have been implemented. There's a small parking area and there's a restroom. And they looked at the feasibility of various uses that had been floated for that site. In 2007, the town had the opportunity to buy the 31-acre Tuchman parcel. And so now together, those two parcels have formed one contiguous park. And really, the two parcels are seamlessly connected with the Montgomery Pine Needham as well. So it altogether forms an extensive open space. And then various open space plans and planning reports and studies have been done by the town since then, which this open space supports the goals of. And I'll just run through those quickly in a second. And as I mentioned in 2020, with the pandemic, people staying at home, we saw an uptick in the use of this park. And, you know, when a park starts to become almost loved to death, you have to start to say, okay, well, how are we going to sustain this level of foot traffic and visitorship and all of this? So that highlighted the need to take a step back and look at the master plan for how we prioritize improvements in this park and how we steward it. So just a few of those reports I was talking about. So the town looked at the Pomerance parcel in 2001, made some recommendations. There's a Cost Cobb neighborhood plan, which this pair of parcels as open space supports goals of. The 2019 Greenwich Plan of Conservation and Development has goals that the Pomerance and Tuchman site can support. Protection of this pair of parcels also supports the 2022 Greenwich Open Space Plan. When we look at things like, you know, protecting undeveloped land from development, that is one aspect of the two parcels that we'll get into a little bit tonight. It's owned by the town, but these two parcels don't have any kind of formal restriction from development placed on them. There's no conservation easements or anything like that. So being owned by the town is a measure of protection, but it's not technically fully protected from development. So that is one of our goals going into this project. The project team feels it would benefit from protection. And this is an excerpt from that open space plan. The Pomerance and Tuchman parcels are down at the bottom of that area that's circled. But what this is showing that these two parcels form a greenway of connectivity to larger open spaces in the region, because the Mianis Greenway is not far to the north from this. So that adds, you know, another level of priority to protecting open space when it connects other existing open spaces. So the goals that our project team, you know, with the town here have going into this project are to form a master plan for Pomerance and Tuchman that protects, provides a pathway for protecting the parcels from development, a strategy for mitigating climate change impacts in the community, enhancing biodiversity and climate resilience in the parcels, identifying appropriate recreational uses and site improvements, finding an appropriate strategy for celebrating the site's unique history. We'll get into that in a moment. Cece, our historical consultant, dug up, there's a ton of history here. And as you probably know, there's a lot of remnants of that of that history on the site. So finding out how to celebrate and feature that if we choose. Building community understanding of the project, site and background. In part, we're doing that tonight by sharing the background with you all. And then forming a master plan based on all of that. That provides a guiding vision, big picture, and then also priority projects and improvements that can be implemented, and will identify you know, paths forward. And a master plan like this can be used as a resource for applying for funding, for pursuing grants, showing that there's been an assessment and prioritization of what the most meaningful improvements would be for a space like this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cece to share the site's history with us.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to stand up because I'm so short that I would really be a talking head. As Greg said, I am an archaeologist, and I must say that my first stateside archaeology project was in Coscob, 45 years ago. And I know that most of you know this history of Coscob, this parcel, but bear with me, I'm just going to do some highlights. I have written many, many pages beyond what I'm giving, but for your patience, I've cut it back down, but I will give you the whole thing. Okay. Most of the settlers who came to the Coscob area started farming mainly for the staples for their own family. And that was the 18th century. It was one of the first densely populated areas because of the harbor. It was Mianus River provided a fantastic harbor. The soil wasn't so good, as you know, it's rocky, right? All of you who work in a garden, they were able mainly to do apples, potatoes, and onions. But as the colonists continued to arrive, the remaining indigenous inhabitants, Munsee speaking members of the larger Delaware nation, they were pushed out. And I'm going to say that they were part of the Siwanoy sachem. You had other smaller tribes along the coastline, but they were all part of the Siwanoy sachem, which is west of the Norwalk 5 Mile River. We have radiocarbon dates in Coscob of 13,000 years ago. We know that in Connecticut, you have many more archaeological sites, and in particular he's trying to do my slides based on my speech, but I'm not following it, am I?
Here you are.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm close enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to see this?
Yes, there you go. I'd like to congratulate Greenwich. It was the second town in the state to enact archaeological preservation as part of your planning and zoning. And so you were seeing, not that I think you could possibly read it, but this is one of many pages of about more than 75 archaeological sites in Greenwich. And so we know that 13,000 years ago is just a drop in the bucket because we have radiocarbon dates in Connecticut from 12,000 years ago. But I think you should be proud of Greenwich's contribution to this record for the state. It was the spread of exotic diseases as well as ever-growing conflicts with settlers and with the British Army, and intermarriage with the settlers, with freed Blacks and with enslaved Africans that really and the dispersal of the Siwanoy, so that you do not have a representative First Nation here. We have a record of the last occupation, which was about 30 acres in the Coscob area near exit 4. That's the Greenwich deeds show that that was the last occupation of Native American tribes here. Okay. The first big transformation of this string of little villages along the coastline was the introduction of roads. First, the Boston Post Road, or Benjamin Franklin's postal route. That came, the 1806 was when it came through the area, which is now the Greenwich High School, through that Israel Putnam's Hill. That's when it was blasted. That was the first time they had the blasting available there. Then you had the railroad come through in 1848. That was the big turning point because you were part of the big city now. Greenwich changed its name at that time from Horseneck to Greenwich, Horseneck being a little too provincial. It was felt. By 1850, you already have 3 trains a day going between Greenwich and New York. Within a few more years, there were 7 trains a day going back and forth. And by 1902, you had a trolley that would connect you with Portchester and to the east, Stamford. So it was that timing that gave you this outside market and connections with the bigger world. It was this combined ease of using the railroad. Excuse me, I already have up here our parcel. Orchard Street on one side, Bible Street on the other. It was the combined ease of the traffic and getting back and forth that introduced the next big era, which you all know about. The era between 1870 and 1920, the Great Estates. So you could come out to Greenwich and have an Italian villa, or you could have an aristocratic estate or a French chateau, whatever you chose to create on your private property. And then you would have outbuildings to evoke this image. And that's the reason you had these great estates. I'm sure all of you have seen the book that came out, 40 years ago, The Great Estates. And it was very much a dominant part of this property and how it was settled and created for the first family that took over. It was the same time period that the Coscob Harbor was turned into a famous art colony. So we had a lot going on at this time. Now, what is now the Pomerance Tuchman property, it began as I think originally it was like an 80.5 undeveloped acres formed from 2 farms. And it was a landscape full of hillocks, streams bounded by wetlands, craggy bedrock outcroppings. You've all walked it. You've stumbled on some things here and there, I think, on those lovely walks through there, as I have. This is what it was like in 1900 when Ernest Thompson Seton bought it. And it was ultimately transformed into Seton's version of a gentleman's estate. Seton was a ruggedly handsome outdoorsman, illustrator, and raconteur when he moved to America in 1896. He had been living in Canada, and while he was in Canada, he worked out in Manitoba and became very enamored of wolves and the wildlife and so forth out in Manitoba. And he brought that love of the outside and nature with him when he came to Coscob. He arrived with his wife, a wealthy American, and he was well known already at that time for his animal stories. He had written his first book, Wild Animals I Have Known, and he was part of an elite group of writers who could actually support himself very well with his writing, magazine articles and books. This was an extremely popular book. There is a quote that a critic at the time when this book came out wrote, "Not only a naturalist and an animal artist of very high attainments, but is a master of a literary style that is at once graphic and fascinating, though doubtless much of the charms of the book is due to his sympathetic love of the wild animals." And I think that comes across every time you read any of his works. Now, by 1900, Seton had earned enough money, and he and his wife, and that's his wife's name on the deed map there, Grace Gallatin. And he found this property because he loved its wildness. And people who went property shopping with him noted that his excitement was in the fact that it was so wild, that he could envision the animals and the cragginess. And the reason you probably love it too. he, earlier in 1800, I'm talking about the great estates, okay? I want you to know that the great estates was already here because Montgomery Pine Needham was a great estate, right? We had some on North Palmer, just over the Mianus River also. So Seton was already as part of the great estates when he came in at 1900. The Montgomery Pine Needham used to have an 18-room mansion there. It had barns and all kinds of support animals and so forth. So Seton was moving right into that area. Seton christened his new Coscob estate Windigool. Now, he says that when he told everyone that Windigool was named for his British, Scottish, he was always back and forth, British or Scottish ancestors. Now, he often claimed to have a connection with a royal family or lineage. We don't know if that was ever documented, and we don't know how secure that was, but he often used that. Other houses he had later on, he also named for these British ancestors. Now, Windigool was reached by a driveway, a quarter of a mile uphill driveway, not from where you see the driveway today, but originally all the way at the very southern end. Now you see these lovely gates and the gates and the gate post and the wrought iron. Keep that in mind. Now, he built the house along his own design plans. It's not necessarily a fabulous architectural design, but it's his combination of Seton style, boxy frames, boxy rooms, terracotta roof. It was his own design, and because we have no record of who designed it. It was only a family home, was only one part of his facet of transformation. He also designed and dammed a brook to create the pond. He added follies around the house, around the grounds. He had a root cellar put in. We don't know. There's your folly, spring house folly. He also put in, also brought in lots of animals to help populate the area. He imported squirrels. We can hardly imagine why you would import squirrels, but we have enough. But he brought in squirrels, otters, fox, waterfowl, peacocks, and over 100 skunks. He was doing some crossbreeding experiments with skunks. And so that was very interesting. Now, if you look back on the gate of the house, keep this gate in mind. Seton built the gate and all the walls around the property because he didn't like the local kids coming in and killing the small animals. He felt you should live with nature. And of course, the small young boys were used to being able to walk onto that property and kill the squirrels or the rabbits. I mean, that was their childhood activity. And he said, no, you can't do that. So that's the reason he put up the walls. But that didn't keep the boys from being very angry. And then they put lewd graffiti and terrible signs on his gates and around the walls. So instead of going to the local police and complaining, what he did is he went to the Coscob school. Because his theory was that not one boy in 1,000 is born bad. Bad boys have badness thrust upon them. Okay, so he's thinking, okay, I can do this. I can help these boys. So he talked to them. It was about the Easter of 1902. And he invited them to come and spend the weekend on his property. And they had a hoot and a half. They enjoyed it. There are some wonderful oral history about these young boys and what they had fun doing while on the property with Ernest Thompson Seton. Let me see if I want to make sure I get this. They had days and nights filled with learning about indigenous folklore, camping in teepees, environmental stewardship, canoeing on the pond, and learning the sport of archery. And woven into these fun group activities were principles of living and morality. This was wonderful for them. It's what was important to Ernest Thompson Seton. And it went on and on for, this is the man who gave this picture to the Greenwich Oral History. It was quite fun for them, I think. Situated up high on the Wendigo property, Seton and he called them the Woodcraft Indians, created a permanent ceremonial center, it was 2 large stones that he set up perpendicular using cement, which I don't think was original, indigenous cement, but he put them up together, and you can still go and find it today. This medicine rock is still intact, and it's on the trail. Now, Seton wrote articles on how he worked with these young boys, and it's published in the Ladies' Home Journal. And these articles became kind of his subsequent book on the woodcraft. And this is what he pulled together as a guide of how he was setting up this Woodcraft Indians. Now, what happened was while Seton was in England on a speaking tour, he met Colonel Robert Peyton Powell. Now, Robert Peyton Powell was a soldier, a retired soldier. He had been in the Boer War, and he had an idea of how to teach scouting because he had been a scout in the war. So it was his idea to do scouting for boys. That was in England. And Seton met with him, and they exchanged papers and so forth. And so that's how the Woodcraft Indians became part of the founding of the Boy Scouts of America. In 1910, Seton helped found the Boy Scouts of America, and he became the chief scout for the first 5 years. He severed ties with the Boy Scouts because they were including the use of guns and so forth in the Boy Scouts. And he did not approve of that, still trying to protect the animals. In 1912, the Setons sell Wendigo to New York financier, excuse me, Maurice Wertheim. It was for $250,000, the most expensive real estate transaction of the time. Ernest Seton Thompson eventually moved to Santa Fe and lived until 1946. His daughter, Anya, I'm sure all of you know this from your childhood. She was the author of many popular historical novels, including The Winthrop Woman, which was partly set in Old Greenwich. Now, Maurice was a successful investor of a very successful industrialist father. And he enjoyed Wendigo in Coscob as a summer weekend retreat. I don't know if any of you know this, but in 1931, it burned, had a very, very bad fire there. And when they rebuilt it, they got rid of the 3rd floor and the arcaded porch. But Wertheim was quite an impressive man. He was the founder and former director of the New York Theater Guild, an avid art collector, all now at the Fogg Museum in Harvard. He was a champion chess player. He is credited with initiating the American-Russian chess battles. Foremost, he served as president of the American Jewish Committee, and he was honorary trustee of the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies of New York. Now, over time, the acreage grew. It was at this time that you see here was 115 acres. This is a 1938 map. And it's very hard to tell, but up close, you can see that it's already divided into the estates, separate estates for the Wertheim's daughters. They had 3 daughters, and the property was divided at that time. The Anne Langham, Barbara Tuchman, and Josephine Pomerance. Now, as noted on the 2 plaques installed on the Wendigo walls, on June 7th, 1942, Zionist and selected American Jewish Committee leaders met informally at Wendigo and developed the Koskov formula that advocated unrestricted Jewish immigration to make organized an autonomous commonwealth. The Koskov formula caused a great deal of controversy among the American Jewish Committee leadership and was rejected only after World War II, when the full extent of the Holocaust became known and no refuge was found for its survivors, did the dissenting factions join in an effort to establish a Jewish state. Maurice Wertheim died in 1950 at the age of 62, but his children and grandchildren have carried on his legacy and also Seton's legacy. It's all about caring and stewardship. Josephine Wertheim Pomerance spearheaded efforts for nuclear arms control as founder and head of the Committee for World Development and World Disarmament. She later helped lead the Non-Governmental Committee on Disarmament, a group that played a major role in promoting disarmament at the UN. Wertheim's daughter, Barbara Tuchman, 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, grew up and continued to live in Koskov on a part-time basis. There is the claim that Barbara Tuchman is the woman who unwittingly taught JFK strategy. After reading her Guns of August, Jack Kennedy bought dozens and dozens of copies of the book. And he considered it such an insightful examination of what led up to World War I that he distributed it to US military leaders with the command, read it. Kennedy credited the insights gained from Tuchman's book to have been very instrumental in settling the Cuban Missile Crisis. Barbara Tuchman had 3 daughters, Jessica, Lucy, and Alma. Barbara's writing studio or cabin still stands on the 43-acre Alma Tuchman parcel at the southern limit of the outside the Seton Wertheim parcel. Jessica Tuchman Matthews at one time was director of global issues for the National Security Council. She is a recognized American international affairs expert with a focus on climate and energy, defense and security, nuclear weapons, and conflict and governance. Now, Rafe Pomerance, Josephine's son, is an American environmentalist. He is a distinguished senior Arctic policy fellow of the Woodwell Climate Research Center. Since the late 1970s, he has played a key role in raising awareness of the risk of climate change in U.S. government policy. Until 2001, Seaton's Windyghoul was a functioning residential home. The town of Greenwich acquired the property, approximately 75 acres. The town, with much public input and consideration, stabilized the historic resources for the future. Today, the remaining stone walls outline the first story of the original Windyghoul. All of us are currently in the process of considering the best path for the future, for the public and the varied resources. How do we care for, preserve, celebrate, and enjoy this historical and natural treasure?
Thanks, Cece. And that all leads us to the site today. So it has this incredible rich history, and there's remnants of that physically all throughout the landscape, which is what makes the Pomerance and Tuchman site so interesting to explore. So I'm going to go through some of the existing features that a visitor nowadays experiences when you come to this park. It's, as we said, it's set aside for passive recreation. That was the goal that was achieved in 2001 when the Pomerance parcel was first bought. The park today offers hiking trails are probably the main feature all throughout its acreage. There's a parking area off of Orchard Street. There's signage that orients visitors right off of that parking area, and restrooms not far from there. In the center of the park, at the pond, which you can see in the middle of the map there, there's a dam which affords waterfront access. Fishing is allowed, boating is not allowed. There isn't really access to bring a boat to the interior of the park. And then the rest of it is earthen trails used for hiking, jogging, and dog walking. So the two main points of arrival that are somewhat formalized are the Orchard Street parking lot, which has that signage kiosk with the map on the left. And then on the right, there's a more modest signage kiosk welcoming people from the Bible Street playground. There's also informal access from the Montgomery Pine Needham that just sort of weaves its way into the Pomerance and Tuchman parcels. And as I described, there's the parking area. The next few slides, you'll see where we are on the map with these photos with the little yellow circle on the map that's going to move around. So over here is the Bible Street entrance. There's a few former driveways which are paved with asphalt, and there's stone dust paving along the dam. And then the remainder of the site is accessed by informal packed earth hiking trails. There's one place where there's a wooden boardwalk crossing a wetland in the north, crossing over Brothers Brook. And there's a little bit of directional signage throughout the park, not a ton. There's some blazed trails, so a bit of organization to keep people oriented while walking here. There's one restroom not far from the parking area. This is that folly that Cece was telling us about, constructed back during the Great Estates era. These are basically decorative structures built to make the landscape look almost more historic than it was at the time, but now even the Great Mansion is a folly. This is the dam. This is kind of one of most of the site's forested. The dam is the place where it opens up to a wider vista. You get out into the sun, spend time by the water. The house up on the west side of the pond was a more modern house that was occupied, I think, by the Pomerance family. And when the town acquired this property in 2001, part of the recommendations that the committee put together were to find a nonprofit who could lease this house that wouldn't be incompatible with the rest of the property's use as a park. So there's a nonprofit. Ableist is an organization that assists people living with disabilities, and they there's people who live here and stay here during the day, and it's compatible. It seems to be compatible with the uses of the site, and it's a good use for that house. So that part's a little bit off limits to the public. So on the other side, across from that, from the pond, is this sunken garden back from Seaton's era, which has no special attention brought to it. It's off of one of the formalized trails. You just sort of stumble upon it if you're walking a little bit off trail, but it's kind of an interesting place with its retaining walls and its terracing. Despite overgrowth, it still kind of reads like a garden. Whereas up on top of the hill, the Windy-Gould Mansion ruins have been purposely curated by the town. The mansion was becoming dilapidated and posed a lot of risks and was falling into disrepair. So it was decided, I think it was back in 2014, to selectively demolish the house but leave the rugged, intact stone first floor. So now it provides this kind of interesting ruin that is surrounded by a mowed lawn up on the top of the hill that really centers the site's history, kind of in the middle of the park. And flanking it are a couple of overlooks to the east and to the west, which at times can be overgrown with vegetation that kind of blocks the views. There's a boardwalk that spans between the two hilltops at Seaton's former mansion. And this leads over one of the paths down in the woods over to the former swimming pool of Windy-Gould, which has since been filled in, but its stone terraces and stairs are still there, semi-intact in the woods, overgrown with invasive vines and plants and things. There's a lot of, Cora will talk about this in a moment, a lot of residential garden plants that sort of became established in the woods because of its history as a overgrown, former mansion site. There's this interesting feature down here associated with Windy-Gould, the root cellar on the hillside coming down from Windy-Gould down in the woods. And that's just, you can walk right into it. It's just kind of left in an unaltered state. There's a bit of graffiti in there today. And Cora is going to talk a bit about the existing ecological conditions on the site.
Hello. Okay. So yeah, as Dan mentioned, a site visit was conducted in early September that focused on reviewing the ecological details, characteristics of the park. The map on screen was put together based on these characteristics that we observed. Most of these characteristics are influenced, namely from geography. Much of this park is either high and rocky or wet and low. And that therefore then influences what vegetation you have growing throughout the park, overstory and understory vegetation. So much of the vegetation that we observed on site is fairly typical of a southern New England forest. A lot of the dominant trees included American beech, red oak, red maple, Norway maple, which is invasive. But one big characteristic is the tulip trees. We observed quite a few large tulip stands on the property. Tulip poplar, it's the same species with different names, has quite a large range. But if you're looking at just New England, it's mostly concentrated in southern New England, so Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. So it's fairly it's more common in our lower states. Another feature that we were looking for was wetlands. Before going out to the site, we conducted desktop surveys to kind of see where wetlands had been formally mapped, looking at hydric soils, and then going out to those parts of the park and seeing if the desktop survey was confirmed by on-site investigations. No formal delineations were conducted. It was mostly kind of just quick observations of soil and looking at signs of hydrology and wetland vegetation. These are some examples. The lawn behind the restrooms near the main parking area is a notable wet area. There's also areas along trails that are quite notable. We found some areas that had not been formally mapped that appeared to be additional wetlands on property as well. Another feature that people are probably familiar with if you've been to the park is the meadow. There's a trail that leads from the root cellar up and around the meadow. Meadows are a fairly unique habitat. Typically, when you find a meadow, you develop it because it's flat and there's not much to get rid of. But meadows also make for important habitats, not just pollinators, but also a lot of native birds will use meadows for nesting and for cover habitat. We found evidence of what looked to be quite a few invasives in the meadow. I'll get deeper into invasives in a later slide, and also what looks to be evidence of encroachment from trees that are encroaching on the meadow from the sides, and also trees and invasives that are growing up within the meadow itself. But that is typical. It's common for habitats to shift and change. Typically, if you want to keep a meadow, that means you would need to maintain it as a meadow. And here we are. Ooh, sorry. Invasives, everyone's favorite topic. As Dan mentioned before, with the previous history of the site being homesteads, being big estates, it's common to have invasives, sites with a lot of previous disturbance. It's easy for invasives to establish themselves. A lot of these, many of you here are probably familiar with. You've probably seen them in your own backyards. Tree of Heaven is a common one. Japanese barberry is a very common one. Spotted lanternfly has gotten a lot of attention in recent years. Beech leaf disease is becoming a growing problem in Connecticut and much of the rest of the country. Japanese silkgrass. Many of the invasives that we observed, though, were mostly concentrated along the trail edges rather than within the park interior. That does make sense where you have most of the activity, most of the movement of people. It's easier for invasives to establish and move around with the aids of people moving around.
So to start to summarize all of the background information that we were looking into, we're going to talk about challenges and opportunities at this unique site. So Cora was just talking about invasive, plant diseases, invasive plant species. In addition to some of the ones Cora mentioned, there's jumping worms or a newcomer to the area that affects the soil. There's a host of challenges that are typical to a large property like this. There's impacts of foot traffic on trails, which is ongoing. We talked about that at the beginning. One of the slides Cora shared shows where you have ponding in a trail. People tend to walk around it to avoid that, and then that causes the trail to get wider and wider and wider. So that gets into, maintenance and planning of where trails go. It's one of the great uses of the park is it's well used for walking dogs, but with that comes the need to pick up dog waste, and that's often cited as a challenge. And then just general ongoing maintenance of trails, trees, and structures on the site. So some images of some of those challenges. Trail erosion is a common one. Again, not unique to this site, but this site has, a few instances where the clear space where foot traffic goes is also where water flows as it makes its way downhill, and that scours and causes damage. And of course, there's loads of opportunities for a site as unique as this. As we've been over, it's not just a woodland, it's a woodland that's full of remnants of Greenwich's history. There's a diverse forest composition, mix of species. There's scenic, diverse landscapes. It's a very interesting place to walk through for that reason, including meadow. The meadow itself has the potential for enhancement as a pollinator habitat. It serves that role already, but there's further opportunity there. Thinking larger in scale, the site's walking distance from a lot of people's homes. It's connected to the neighborhood and the other neighborhood parks. There could be potential for additional signage, whether that's historic, ecological, educational, trail maps. This gets into the content of what we'll discuss the rest of the evening. So what we're planning to do is we'll turn it around to all of you, and we'll spend some time together having some kind of question and answer discussion time. It's open-ended. You know, we haven't started drafting recommendations for this plan yet, but the goal, as I think you can probably tell from the presentation so far, is we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here with the Pomerance and Tuchman site. I think we probably all agree that it's well used as a site for passive recreation and provides a valuable resource. And the goal is probably finding out how to steward it and protect it so it can continue to serve as that resource that seems to be so well valued. So that's, yeah, so we'll just open it up. And I'm just, for the sake of anybody who's watching on Zoom, because this is being recorded, since you all don't have microphones, as a formality, I'm going to do my best to repeat the questions that you each say. Go ahead.
What is that? How what brought about this?
Maybe, Greg, do you want to speak to that? The question was, what is the status of current maintenance at the park?
Yeah, so the current maintenance is we're, as a department, Parks Department, and with volunteer groups, are removing invasives, planting native trees and plants and shrubs and perennials, working in the meadow. So there is work being done, but we're looking for this project and this master plan to cohesify all the work and set some priorities and sort of, you know, produce the roadmap to achieve all the goals we're doing now and other goals as well. So there is maintenance and work happening in the park, but we're looking for this to really highlight what it is we want to do and collectively, but also, you know, maybe even help set some timelines and also, you know, request extra funding or capital projects or, you know, maybe go for grants to help support some of these projects as we have them spelled out in the master plan.
Go ahead.
My name is Susan Petrelli, and I wanted to say that we love this place. We don't want to see it. I mean, bare minimum. We want to see it maintained and maintained really well. This year, I don't know what happened, but all these trees are growing. Usually they mow and they mow the hill. All these trees are growing, so you're gonna have to cut all those down. But my main concern was, you know, in your letter, you said we're concerned about traffic and ecological degradation, and yet some of the ideas in the survey would only increase the bike trails, dog park, active recreation. These are things that I could go totally against the whole idea. Such an oasis, unique place. I know my family and I have enjoyed it for generations. We like it.
Thank you. I'm going to assume that the applause generally signifies agreement. Just for the sake of those who couldn't hear, the comment was, we love the park the way it is. It's a valuable resource. And some of the options that were floated in the online survey, including bike paths, dog parks, represent too high a level of active recreation, and we want to maintain that passive use that it currently has. And the focus in that case would be keeping up with what we already love, making sure it can continue to offer essentially the same program it currently does. Note down the applause. Yes.
Hi, my name is Eric Shermer. been living in the area for about 18 years. I spend time there at least 2-3 times a week. I love this area. It's a major reason why I actually moved to Greenwich. I'm a very active person. I do like bicycling and so on, but I am in agreement. This is an oasis. We need quiet areas and whatever. Bicycling or something like that is okay, but it has to be a separated, clear area, because hiking, dogs, strollers, and bicycles, you can't have like disorder and so on. So this is certainly something to wrestle with, right? I would encourage you to think winter and summertime. I don't quite understand why we cannot have a skating rink or something like that, because we don't have enough skating in Greenwich. Snowshoeing is wonderful in winter. An observation I have is the trail signages are not very good. There's no distances, so somebody doesn't know 1 mile gentle family walk, 5 mile or sporty type of trail. It goes a bit to a bigger point. The town of Greenwich somehow is not capable of doing a mobile app that will have a map, because if we did it all together, right, we could get this on our devices, then we don't need to do so much signage because we can bring it along. I am for signage in the park, particularly if you have out-of-town visitors that are not familiar with the area and so on, that could help. I would ask you as our consultants and so on to consider a few things. I'd like to really understand who uses that park the most. I suspect it's very nearby. I see a lot of foot traffic. There's not really so many cars. Most cars have Connecticut plates. Costco is a large part of Greenwich. Unfortunately, it does not have an active current neighborhood association, which is a disadvantage. I don't know whether there is the Friends of Tuchman and Pomerance Park, but I would encourage you to seek a little bit like who is involved. We have various representatives here from Tree Conservancy. Myra, what do you represent? Sustainability Committee and some others. So there's a lot of expertise in this room. I do have a crazy visionary type of idea. We have a water flow problem in Greenwich. And I'd like to see something like small lake, whichever we're going to call it, Pomerance, because we need to redirect water. We have water issues everywhere. DPW has looked left and right. Mr. Kramer, it's not easy. We have huge challenges, but we cannot defer into the future. There is a possibility to have some sort of a drought reserve, to do this in an aesthetical way, with nice damming or walking things and so on, so that peacefulness can be preserved. But we need to deal better with water. Too complicated, too expensive is not an answer. We need to make progress and think differently. It doesn't have to be pumps and pipes. Maybe it could be a beautiful aqueduct or something. So let's also think about the water issues around, please. And the other thing is, I don't see too many people in here. Sorry, I'm 63 years old. I'm an old fart, okay? But I don't see too many families with kids here. People's in their 20 and 30. We have a lot of newcomers to town, especially in Costco. Please do a Saturday morning meeting at the Costco Library where the families with the strollers and the dogs can come by. Please spend the extra time to come and seek broader feedback. Thank you so much for your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And once again, I'll respond to a few of those things, assuming not everyone who would listen in later hears. The comments included when multi-season opportunities should be looked at, potentially skating, trail signage. There's an opportunity there. A mobile app could help greatly with that to further enhance signage. More involvement in the neighborhood could help, though there is the Friends of the Park organization already. The water flow problem, there was a study done. Who was the consultant? There was a study done a few years ago that looked at possible sites in Greenwich for flood mitigation, and they did a chapter on this site looking into the feasibility of that.
No progress.
There's been no progress since it, you say?
We need to continue to work on that.
Their recommendations were very, very general. I looked through it and it didn't really say, here's what you would engineer, here's what you would do. It was kind of like, okay, for further study.
I don't want to speak too much, but it all leads to no action, which is not acceptable. It's 2023.
Yeah, so we'll note that down. And then, yeah, further public outreach for this project. I think that is a great suggestion. Any strategies to reach the broadest audience possible. A Saturday morning meeting at the library could be a good idea for the next meeting. So we still have to plan that one. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lindsay and I'm the director of the Greenwich Detention Center, and very much wanted to thank you all for this process and hosting this meeting and having the whole town. Obviously the Pine Needham and the Pomerance properties are backyard, the home for the Greenwich Botanical Center, and to Susan's point, we also don't want to see much change, and that is primarily because it is a laboratory work. We are able to reach many, many children. We have, we're in a third experience for the entire third grade of Greenwich Public Schools. We also do many field trips for the first grade, and we're reaching out to many other schools to offer our property and our programs to the school to learn about ecology, science, habitat, botany, horticulture, etc. We also have on-site programming for children, the nature immersion program called Forescape. So the fact that this amazing place offers an environment in which to do all of those things and reach the families and the children in our community is hugely, hugely valuable. So I'm just going to put that plug in, and we would also very much be happy to host a meeting at the Botanical Center, and I would also be very happy to rally all of our families in support of the vision for the Pomerance and bikes and
Thank you. Yeah, yep.
Guys, we do apologize. We were supposed to have the mobile microphone for the podium. We did not have that set up, but we do want to hear your comments. We want to capture it accurately. So one of our thoughts is we have that far right microphone next to Dr. Kramer over there. We could turn that microphone on if you guys feel comfortable speaking directly in there, so we can have everybody on Zoom and on the recording hear your comments, because we just want to make sure that we accurately present that. So if that's comfortable with you guys, we can get that set up over on the far right side of the microphone right there. All right, thank you.
Yeah, don't be afraid to step up to the microphone. Go ahead. Yeah, well, I can recap it too if you, yeah.
Limited, the dogs are, I just think the dogs really.
Yeah. Yeah, there seems to be agreement. I mean, the comment was that dog walking is currently a highly valued use of the park, and for any plan going forward to continue to include that and not further limit walking dogs on the park. Go ahead.
I have a statement from the first black review of breast who says over 20 years ago, when I was we did a pilot program, adults with media fight. It went so well that we never did. Having off all their threats, allowing that physical activity is quite many.
Thank you. So that was a pilot program that allowed dogs where exactly? I just didn't catch that part. I didn't hear you.
Sorry, first I just wanted to correct that there was a pilot plan when he was on Parks and Rec 20 years ago, because there was consideration whether or not to let dogs in, and it was a 6-month program and it never changed. He's just saying doesn't want to change.
Oh, I see. So basically the use of the park today, which does allow walking dogs on the park, was piloted 20 years ago that was considered successful, and then it has never changed. It was basically, it was instituted. Okay.
It's two tenant units.
Thank you.
Now it's single family.
Yes, thanks. I saw this hand first, I think.
My name is Tom Cahill. I love the park. Thank you for what you've done so far, letting it be the natural way it is. Cece, I appreciated your history, and I think that the one thing that I would love to see is that in the hill at the southern part of the park, where you can see the house where Barbara Tuchman actually.
Yes.
You're right. There's like a particular going up, just barely see it. I would love there to be some sort of plaque. Something about it. Like it's really remarkable that this woman in the woods of Cascade wrote books that arguably solved even this crisis. It's just amazing. And I just feel like it's not really recognized at all. And I always tell people when I'm there, like that can't be no plaque.
Well, it's not actually on the property, you can just see it,
You can
so.
see it on the, yeah, it's on the, I guess it's on the private.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
There it is. Point out.
Okay.
Yeah, so the comment was the writer's cottage where Barbara Tuchman wrote her famous books should attention be brought to it. Currently, that structure is just off the town-owned property. It's located on the privately owned parcel of one of Barbara Tuchman's daughters who still lives on the property. So I guess all I can really say is just currently it's not owned or controlled by the town. And I suppose any sort of.
Just like pointed out, it's up there, because you wouldn't even know that it, I mean, you'd have.
Right.
you'd have to-
Yeah, I agree. It's a fascinating structure, and I think that it would have to be done in coordination with the person who owns that land to make sure it was done appropriately, if so. Yeah. Go ahead.
You don't know what else.
So the comment was that the owner of that property has had to struggle with vandalism and upkeep of that structure in the past, and we want to make sure we're being the best neighbor possible. You raised your hand a while ago, I think.
Support the allowance of. Yeah, but the house, the boardwalk needs another rail on the bottom. I've been on there. There is any fall off for children, small dogs. One more rail, I call it, but I say immediately. Yeah, I've seen a woman. Dog. Very safe.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, the comment was first, additional support of walking dogs on the property, and secondly, attention to the raised boardwalk that has gaps between the rails that are probably out of regulation and should be addressed as soon as possible for safety. Go ahead. Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you want to go to the far right one, just because we have the Zoom here, I don't want to connect.
I got to turn it off.
Cut it off, right?
So good evening, folks. My name is James. Hello? Oh, okay. Good evening, folks. Just wanted to say, as maybe one of the younger family-oriented individuals in the room here, so we have two young daughters. We're a dog-loving family. We use this park a lot. And the survey concerned me just, kind of some of the questions and how they were asked. So a few things I want to get out there. One, I think really all the park needs is some TLC, right? You need better signage. You need, directional signage, maps, be it online or print. Maybe when you enter. You also need, I think, one of the things that was a big worry was the whole parking. I think the parking is fine as it is. Maybe better advertising that you can park on Bible Street, in the large parking lot there. I feel like that's kind of a back entrance to the park that many don't know of as an option of parking, unless you're really, in the weeds in the area to say. But, besides trail maintenance, and mowing the meadow now and again to kind of keep it, and also preserving those historic structures you talked about, right? To young kids, it's a whimsical area. I think one of the questions talked about getting rid of the bridge, right? That bridge is kind of phenomenal when you're a young kid. You can go over, run around, come down and underneath it, right? And the little stone house that you guys had up in your slideshow before. I think these are all things that make this property unique, to families, to children. And it's also just great to get out there and walk with your dog, right? And I see dogs using the park all the time, winter, spring, summer, and fall. So I would ask, please, no additional pavement in the park, right? No additional parking spaces. I think we're kind of good there. But just maintain it, right? Give it that TLC it needs. Give it the better signage, so individuals can enjoy it more. Maybe a historic note or two about, more about the park as a whole and the property as a whole. But it's so well connected with Cascab, and with the school next door, with the garden center, next door, that it would be a shame to turn it into a more active use area or to pave it over with a larger parking lot. I think, keep it the way it is, give it some TLC, and it'll be a great use, for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Been walking this park since I was 7. And over that time, I absolutely love that at least one pavement became lawn again. So this is a space that has been fantastic at being the environment. And for many of the school groups, many of the people in this area, this is the pressure valve for getting to still be in this area. Paper trail maps. I hike extensively. These QR codes, great. There is not cellular reception for most of this park. I am unofficial Lorax guide, trail maintenance person. I haul as big a thing as I can haul off these trails. But there are many people who do get turned around in the space, but these little QR codes aren't going to help for this particular spot, given the geology of this particular spot. Unless you're way up on the hills. So post-storm, not just volunteer citizen, but just the trails themselves, the existing trails, getting the huge stuff off. When the trees just fall lengthwise down the favorite trail and it takes years for that tree to rot before it's cut up. So just the actual trails that people want to stay on, and can't, just collectively get everything off, because sometimes you do need machinery to get some of the bigger logs off. But otherwise, echoing what everyone else has said, is that it is special because it is what it currently is.
Yes, go ahead. That's okay. I'll repeat it.
Fish bank or that was that. I would also like to see the stairs coming down from the bench out of the lake. The stairs make the stage down. Then floor space, used to have cost. They have made up 5 years ago. Things like that can be left up.
Thank you. The comments were about after, it was you saying after storms, fallen trees, or was that the previous commenters? I'm looking at my notes. I apologize. The fish ladder was the first comment. Could there be a way for, where there's a change in elevation in a waterway to have a way for migrating fish to come up in elevation with a fish ladder or eels? And the stairs from the ruins to clean those up and make them safe and usable. And the program was called Forest Days? Okay, yeah, I haven't learned about that. They used to have an awesome teaching area that the commenter wishes could remain in place. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sandy Gross. I live right on the edge of the dam, so I hike from my house. So, but my question is really about maintenance because it is a little scary. I've been in town for 30 years on the Needham, and every time after a storm, it really looks different. And I do get concerned that there are trees that are about to fall off the trail. And you guys have been very responsive. I've emailed the town, and people called me, hey, where is that spot? And you found it. But what is the current maintenance program place?
So the question was, what is the maintenance program in place currently with regard to dangerous and fallen trees in the Pine Needham, but I assume in the Pomerance and Tuchman site as well? Maybe Greg, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I can answer that. Yeah, if there's something that's precarious or dangerous, certainly, send me an email or let staff know, and we'll take a look at it. We don't, as a ecological reason, go around and remove dead trees or snags unless they're really close to a trail or seem to be dangerous, only because dead wood is it's so intricate to their survival and the ecology of the woodlands. You have various species that only live in dead wood. So to remove dead trees, if they're not a hazard, is really eliminating a very important part of the ecological component of the woods. So again, it's really on a case-by-case basis. If you see something that, just kind of stands out to you, certainly let us know. We'll take a look at it and make that determination. Absolutely.
Yes, yeah, the microphone. No, thanks. Or you may have to turn your little red button on.
Okay, I've got my red button on. I'm a neighbor to the Pomerance property. We live right along Brothers Brook. And I think it needs to be mentioned that part of the experience of the park is destroyed on the weekends in winter. Beginning this next weekend, the skeet shooting from the country club, the Greenwich Country Club, will commence at 10 in the morning and persist through 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. And it's heard throughout the park and throughout the neighborhood. And I don't know what we can do about it within this master plan, but it is part of the experience of that park. And it needs to be noted.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Pete Urey, and I've lived in town about 50 years. And my wife and I use the Pomerance, Tuchman, and Pine Needham property at least once a week, probably twice a week, and it's marvelous. It's marvelous because it is still virtually untouched woodlands. That's not to say that in the presentation we heard this evening, that there are, I don't know, hot spots, let's call them that, which can be very entertaining or fun or educational for someone visiting the park. I think the Sunken Garden's a good example of that. I think the ruin is an example of that. I think the history of Mr. Seaton is interesting to highlight and have some information about. On the other hand, I think there's a real danger if you do too much now. But I learned, because I was involved with the master planning for Binney Park, that you can make a plan not only for what to do currently, but also for the future. And you can not necessarily have to execute. And I'm sure if Mr. Siciliano is in the room, there's probably a budget issue that will go along with that too, that may actually prompt something not to happen in the immediate future. But the message there is allow the ideas that go into the master plan to reflect not only what all of us, you, me, everyone else, wants to have happen in the short range. And I share that feeling. Let's get it looking a little better. Let's improve the sunken garden, but then set some priorities for what this open space will do to serve our community 10, 15, 20 years from now. The beauty of Binney Park, 90 years old, is that it still has, as part of its 5 sections, about a 10-acre untouched woodland from, say, 1930. And if I ask how many people knew of this, to raise their hand, how many hands would go up? Benny Kitchell. Well, maybe 15% of you. And it's right there in the middle of Old Greenwich. It's a wonderful resource, untouched, open space.
Thank you for the comment. It reminds me of a question that I think we're going to be looking at as we get into the master plan recommendations. I think we're hearing a lot of over and over. We love the park the way it is. We don't want it to, we don't want to lose this resource. We don't want it to change it. And we're going to probably start zeroing in on, okay, how do we best steward what's there today? And one of those questions that maybe is a little more nuanced is how best to showcase the site's history specifically. Like there's ruins where there's weeds growing over them. Do we clear those weeds away? Do we bring a formalized path to more of those ruins? Do we put educational signage on more of those? Do we put more of like commemorative plaques on them? Do we leave them completely alone and have them as sort of features you discover that are overgrown? That whether to clear weeds away gets into the invasive species management question too. If there's a plant that ought not be in the park for the sake of the native ecosystem, you're kind of clearing out the historic ruin while you're at it. So they can be a little bit interrelated, but finding an appropriate strategy for celebrating the fact that this site has such unique history and it has these physical ruins that can deteriorate, they can become overgrown. Do we want to bring more attention to those? And if so, how? That's kind of the level of detail we may find ourselves zeroing in on with that particular topic. So this hand first.
Yeah, I'm good fishing from Pascal, and I mainly came here because of the dog. I think that change. Dogs over there for years. And it sounds like I'm in agreement with most here. If you came there in the morning, 75% of the cars park at the park. I mean, yeah, 75%. They would have dogs. Only 25% would not. But the way it is used now, I'm glad. Somebody else just mentioned another thing. That's what the car or what not. But when you come out of that park, you go left, you can hardly see it. Now there's one big tree in the way, but there's an awful lot of bushes that grow up. I got to admit, I went home one day and I almost got whacked. I got my hedge clippers and I put that down so I saw you out there. Well, there's problems with dogs. I worked in law enforcement, and in this town 35 years, and I've had dog fights. They're there, other problems, never in there. Number one story I remember of dog. Good, they picked up after themselves, 90%. I mean, I was from home. Broke my foot on the grass, but that's rare. People really do take care of it. I'm glad to see that most people seem to be in agreement.
Thank you. The comment was further agreement that dog walking needs to remain unmessed with as is on the site. It's an extremely valuable use, and that there could be improvements made for the visibility of cars turning out of the Orchard Street parking lot because of vegetation blocking the view of oncoming cars. And that in the gentleman's experience, there has not been issues of kind of negative encounters between dogs and users of the park. Was there? Yeah. Go ahead. Yep, it's you. Yep.
I've seen a couple of walking friends that I don't know who they are, but I've seen them for years and years walking through the park. I live on Montgomery Lane, and there's a park at the front of it that says Wild Egg. That seems to me to kind of capture the spirit of the park. You know, it's completely different by Lost Point. And with apologies to the other gentleman, Beauty Park, I've only seen a flat grass. And the wild acres of that wildness and the woodsiness of it is what you feel like you're breathing, you know, real air. I've been working through there about 6 days a week for 20 years. And I will say the signage is an issue. I have personally rescued one little girl whose mother was caught, hit a runaway. I've periodically steered people back to where they think the car might possibly have been parked. So I agree with the point about QR codes. It just doesn't work on your phone for most people. So I would be in favor of more actual physical signs with arrows on them. I do think, you know, there's so many passages like primary, secondary, tertiary paths. Some of them, they kind of swamp. And I would have an objection to making them a little more passable with boardwalks and things like that. I know there's also the contiguous with this whole area next to Pioneer, there's also the Cobble Sanctuary, right, which is owned by the Audubon folks, but basically it's connected through the Cobble Sanctuary all the way through the Pioneer, through to everything else. And what they've done at the Cobble Sanctuary, they put, you know, kind of little bridges over all the areas, and that's very intermittent. Right? I think there's one. Yeah. Towards the western side of the side of the
Yes.
swamp areas
Behind the.
Yes, muddy. Right, exactly. The final point is, I thought though it's a shame that the overlooks don't really allow you to see the lake most of the time. There's a lot of overgrowth or trees or whatever. I don't know whether it's native or not. But it seems to me when you're in an elevated position, you've got the ruins and everything, and the park, it would be nice to be able to look down and see the park. And in my experience, you really can't see it very well. It's obscured most of the time. You've got the elevation, you've got something else to look at. I don't see why you wouldn't open it up. And the final point is, you said something about we put in more access paths to notable sites. I personally wouldn't like to see that. I like to see people find their own way out.
Thank you. The comments included reinforcement of that agreements that more physical wayfinding signage could be useful. QR codes won't be practical due to reception here. Paths that get swampy could benefit from boardwalks. And there's nearby examples where that's done well, and that the overlooks are quite often overgrown with the views blocked. And the gentleman feels formalized pathways to the ruins might not be the most appropriate treatment. Go ahead.
My name's Bob D'Angelo. I was born and raised here in Greenwich, right across from Pioneer Park. Spent a lot of time in there as a kid, hiking, didn't shoot any animals in there. Every now and then, on a warm day, so you're high, would skip school and jump in the lake and just swim. So, a lot of fun in there. I'm on the Selectmen's Active Transportation Task Force. And my primary focus is safe riding for young kids to try to get to school safely. So, I know I'm certainly not advocating opening up the park for bike riding, but there's a main artery trail there, basically from the lake that goes up to the Macadam Road, Montgomery Lane back to the Botanical Center. And a multi-purpose trail, normally about 8 feet wide. There's different substrates, not advocating macadam, not paving, not cutting down trees, not moving anything. We would love, the task force would love to see some consideration to feasibility of if that one trail that links the lake to the road there near the Botanical Center could become a multi-purpose path that's shared, so that kids could basically ride their bike to school to the new Central Middle School in Greenwich. Basically, kids are looking for self-independence. Traffic's really bad. I think people would use the park if they could have a family ride in there, basically. Yeah, that's it. There's different substrates that drain, that withstand weather. We've seen them around basically, and we appreciate just some consideration to see if we could make that a connected trail to get to schools safely in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
After this fall.
Okay, then I'll summarize both of comments.
For losing in winter time.
Oh, okay. That route would be perfect for luging in wintertime. So the comment was, could a suitable route be found on one of the main artery trails through the park that would connect with more of a paved multi-use trail treatment for children biking to school? As I understood it, kind of on a north. Sorry. As a landscape architect, when I think of compacted stone dust, I think of that as a type of pavement, but not asphalt. But more solid than earth, more solid than just the packed earth trails that we have. Something kind of in between is what you may be envisioning. I mean, a multi-use trail can be paved with asphalt and it becomes more durable. And I want to add to that, is there a need for a handicap accessible trail through here? And would that double as that?
Say that basically. I mean, I think part of active transportation is access for all users, and adaptive users with a safer, grade basically, or just safer substrate could enjoy the park also.
Yeah. Well, when we maybe after we're finished together, you could point out the route you had in mind that sounded fairly specific, and we could talk about that a little further. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Pete Rocco. I've born and raised, and I use the park system. I've also done a lot of hiking with and without dogs. My aunt is a park. I would like to pose for consideration, once you introduce bikes to the trail system, it can be difficult to control the use. I have veered away from hiking in Miami because packs of mountain bikers, not just one or two, and I'm a previous mountain biker, I love it, but packs of mountain bikers come in from Westchester County because they found the park online, and I'm there with a dog trying to prevent the dog from being run over by the bike, and they don't, go along a slope cliff, they go along at a very fast. I would hate to see anything like that happen in this gorgeous, reserve that we can have. Thank you.
Thank you. So the comment was a concern that once biking is introduced as a activity at a park and the park starts to accommodate that, it can be discovered by mountain bikers who can overuse the park and make it less usable for hikers and other uses. And so to be cautious of that. Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Siobhan Burns. I was born and raised in California. But I moved back to town about 5 years ago. I live on Clover Place. It's right off 5 years. So I'm in there several times a week. And when I first moved back, I lived for a while in California, which obviously has tons of beautiful outdoor resources. When I first moved back to town and was spending time in the park, I was really kind of shocked that this particular town, with the resources and the wealth and the intelligence that it has, wasn't doing more to take care of the park, really from the perspective of the invasives that were taken over. Just seeing like, huge costs, knotweed and tree of heaven and everything. I think for this, and it's so heartening to be here tonight and hear talk about how they love it so much. We want it to stay the way that it is, because I feel the same way, but I want it to be better to take care of. I want to advocate and allocate more resources to it. And a couple of people tonight, including people on the panel, have used the word steward in terms of us taking care of the park. I would like there to be a steward for the park, as there is a top point. Someone who really, this is their responsibility to take care of the park, to institute and implement a plan that we all talk about, and make sure that some of the kind of degradation that we're seeing of trails and of the habitat and all of that isn't taken away. And as much as possible, I'd really love it to be something that we don't have a lot of in other parts of town, which is this natural open space. So from that standpoint, well, I definitely love that so many dog owners use the park, and it's so great to walk in there and see everyone. Lots of people let their dogs off leash, and from the perspective of a natural, trying to maintain this as a natural point, that's not real. It also turns away some people who don't like having dogs run for them, like on them. And while I agree that most people are great about picking up their dog, every time I walk in there, I see not, I see the little bag of dog left on the trail, little elf, all this stuff today. So, so yeah, that's kind of the main thing that I would like to see, is really we have these tools of clearly of this part, and we in this usually so much more than other places can to really take care of them and preserve them for our children and for the
Thank you. The comment was to continue aggressively tackling invasive vegetation. Could there be a steward specifically for this park, a person designated who ensures invasive species are managed, trails are maintained? And then the perspective that while walking dogs is a valuable use of the park, letting dogs off leash can turn off people who aren't comfortable around dogs, can stress the environment, and that dog waste being picked up needs to be done more diligently. So it may lead to further infrastructure or attention, emphasis being brought to bring your dog here, but do it properly. Yeah. Go ahead.
About the dog stuff, I do understand that dogs running all day, like, but I think dogs deserve that, because I do believe that dogs do deserve to live not when I talk about, I do think that we could set up some kind of hours during the day where we wouldn't do that. I think that most dog owners, the dogs right now, and I am there every single day. That I have seen dogs out, and dogs are not aggressive for children or dogs. Very symbiotic. I understand they're afraid of dogs, and they want the dog. Everybody I they want to teach the dog. So I would like to say that about all dogs. The other thing is, I think is so
bags that are around the park that dogs have to keep. These are at certain spots, they're about all. I don't see a lot of litter, and we always when we see it. Class, but dog food bags. That was, I think that actually makes dog waste more. It is a back or an out.
Thank you. The comments were in support of, it was the perspective that off-leash time for dogs is valuable, and a space like this can provide that opportunity for dogs who need that, and that it hasn't been an issue in this person's experience and should be considered, and that the dog waste issue can be addressed by making cleanup easy for people by providing more bins. Is this one first?
And one family that they would look at this book and not have the ball in order to. So I think over the 40 years I've been watching this, that dogs with are dogs don't know fear, no fear. As many of you know, my parents mentioned a fence are that was supposed to visual, and there are many elderly people who have other locations walk. Are not near them when the
Thank you. The comment was the other perspective that this person has had bad encounters with dogs, including being bitten here, has been knocked over, and that elderly people they know have been afraid to come here because of the prospect of dogs being off leash and jumping on them and things like that. And yep. Who did I see next? I think it was you. Yeah, go ahead.
I just like to second that. Nothing against dog. I know a lot of people love their dogs, but I think there's an informal understanding, Greenwich, that maybe you can let your dog off the leash in this park. I see it all the time. Some, it's not normally not a problem, but occasionally dogs are aggressive. There was a guy who used to have these huge, massive dogs. He would let off his leash, thankfully he's no longer around. But not everybody is responsible. It seems I see dogs off the leash in this park more often than any other park. And I think maybe it's not close to supervised. There's a kind of understanding that probably let the dog off the leash, not get in trouble. Personally, I don't have a problem with the dogs at the time, but occasionally they're threatened. And I live right there, so it's not big dogs, but I can see it by some large savage dogs and some others. Yeah, but I think we ought to be a little cautious.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, I'm going just to pause for a moment. I think we've kind of formally scheduled ourselves between 6 to 8 p.m. So we're getting close to the end of our time. So the conversation can obviously go on and on and on. And I just want to make it known we're going to hang out longer and be available to speak kind of more on an informal basis, because I'm sure there's still going to be additional questions and comments to discuss. So you can speak to any of us on the project team at the end of this, and we'll hang out over there near the maps. We brought sticky notes. You can write comments down and stick them right to the maps. And there is the online survey, which is on the town's website under the Parks Department page. And we've gotten a lot of survey responses already. And if you haven't taken it, please tell your friends and family members and anyone who uses this park to take it. And that has the opportunity for open-ended responses as well if you have additional comments that don't fit the form of all of the questions on there. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, as since we'll take a couple more questions here, but we're going to begin to wrap up after maybe 2 or 3 more questions. I think I saw your hand longer ago.
So I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm Nancy Chapin. I'm actually on the board of Parks and Rec, and I just want to be so appreciative of this team and staff. I was trying to take any comments, but please feel free to find me out. I'll take any questions and love your names. But as far as Matt, I just wanted to celebrate the work of Darren and Fred Blue. They have created a map. It is posted on our website, so you can actually download it and bring it with you when you go to the park. Fish ladder, I mentioned fish ladder, Sarah Carr of the Conservation Commission, Baker Conservation Commission, we talked about it, but it was explored. They walked it all the way up from the Oscar Library and went through all the property, and he came to the conclusion that it was maybe more than ice rink. It used to be an ice rink. I don't think anymore. We I think that's their idea. I did drive by horse through there.
He may get a tough winter this season, so.
Yeah, I am a lifelong resident of Kennebuting. And please come up to me with any other ideas. I just put them down. I know we're talking about so thank you all for coming. I love hearing the comments, and I think the dog issue is complicated. And Fred Blue is here. I think we should give him a round of applause because he actually did that. Darren and Sarah Carl, who was pregnant, had no idea at the time, and during a very rainy couple of days, like every single deer path trail did the GIS map. But one thing I did want to mention about the dogs, it is actually law to have your dog leash. So I think that's why those are very concerned about the survey question. We spent a lot of time talking about how to phrase that question, and I think this team did a really good job of handling it sensitively. So I think perhaps there should be a group that gets together and talks about it. It's got to involve health department, parks direct staff, and a larger group. So I think it is complicated. And I know you're raising your hand. I know Fred was.
I just want to know, how do you get hold of the Board of Health?
I'm not on the Board of Health.
I know you're not on the Board of Health, because I Googled every single member, because I think those I have so many lovely friends if I recognise mental health at the hospital, and I felt Board of Health should get involved, and I spoke to Ms. Miller, it was great. We love them to get involved.
Should we take more from the stop it here?
We should also.
Yeah, because maybe yeah. Should probably start wrapping it up, I think. Yeah.
An email address for this meeting. Just go online. So we're not gonna be able to get to it. So it's just gonna encourage them, email it to our parks and trees email. We can send it to, I know we have a survey, but I wanna, since they took time part of the meeting, we can kind of separate that out and kind of have that as a comment in the meeting, so to speak. So we'll just forward that on to you once we receive it. If that works.
Yeah, you're gonna respond to those people who typed additional comments with the email address.
So I'll just ask them to email Parks and Greenwich. And only give them like a day or something, you know, so they're not constantly, and we'll just forward it on to you. That in consideration as a comment within the meeting itself. You know, kind of outside of the survey.
All right. Okay. I'm going to
There's
we,
two
we,
people that we have not heard from at all yet.
that's a good point. We have not heard from the two of you. Your two comments or questions will be the final group-wide ones. And then we are going to disperse and talk more organically.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you mind if I?
Oh, yeah, yeah, sorry, Dan,
Yep.
other Dan
So-
has one comment first.
Yes, I do want to mention that I do know that we have a couple of people that have raised their hands on the online Zoom option. Like I said, we are running out of time here. We do have other stuff on the agenda and we want to take in time to consideration with our consultants here. So if you guys do have any additional comments that are related to this meeting, please send them to parksandtrees@greenwichct.gov with the Pomerance Tuchman public meeting as the headline for that, and we will forward those on to the consultant GZA to get those recorded within the meeting. I do know we have, as Dan reiterated, we do have the survey online for additional feedback, but we do want to make sure that, I mean, you took the time out here to listen to this, so we want to have your comments on record for this particular meeting. So I apologize for not getting to your comments to those of you on Zoom or for those in the audience, but feel free to email us at that address and we will get that incorporated into the comments of this meeting. All right, thank you.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Several people have mentioned stewardship and who would be stewards of this. And might even take a page from the playbook of the Greenwich Land Trust, who has multiple lands all over the place and has a steward and a steward group for each location. So it's like a friends group. And so we could have the friends under the direction of Nancy Tuchman be the stewards. It would work perfectly. We've got it at Greenwich Point. At Greenwich Point. It's everything from pulling down the invasive vine to worrying about being on site, making the observations and getting things corrected and keeping the place natural.
Thank you. Yeah, the comment was in response to who would be the steward of a property like this. You have examples such as the Greenwich Land Trust, which has a steward for each of its locations, and that could be where the role of the Friends of Pomerance and Tuchman could step in and do something similar to steward this park. And the final comment.
First of all, I want to thank you for having this public forum. It's educational and valuable, and I think help hear a lot of questions. I and my dog are in that park every day. My dog's there at least twice a day. And I am constantly amazed that 10 feet after I walk into the park, I can hear cars, barely hear planes. It's a gem. So I encourage you to try and keep it as much like it is today in 15 years. Second one, someone mentioned bags in the park and dogs that are misbehaving in the park. I see a lot of other dog owners here. The dogs that are the problems, the people that don't pick up bags, people are the outliers. I urge you not to make decisions based on the vast minority of people who leave bags by the side of the trail. I can tell you these once every week and a half, I walk out of the park 5 bags. I throw them away because it blows my mind that people will pick up food, tie the bag, and leave it next to the trail for someone. So to answer your question, I'm one of those elves carries and just to show that it's not unique to the park. When I walk to the park from my house off Valleywood, once a month I see a poop bag on someone's lawn on the street. So it's not unique to the park what people do. This is what people do. And they must have people pick up for them at home that lets them feel this is the way the world's supposed to work. I would urge you also to keep bikes off the trails in the park. I don't want to talk about kids going to school on bikes. I went to school on a bike out of high school, and it's terrific. But I don't go to Miana's Park because I've been scared by bikes whipping around a turn faster than I can dodge. I just don't go there. Besides not wondering if my dog's going to be hit by a bike, I don't want to be hit. So if you could limit, if you have bike access, these are limited to a very marked, already established bike right of way, whatever you call it. That's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. So that'll be our final official comment, which I'll recap, which is reiterated that dog walking is a very valuable use of the park. It's a quiet gem and should be kept that way. To not make decisions based on the sort of problem dogs or dog owners who are likely the outliers, and decisions not to be made solely on that. And that bikes should be kept off the trails. Other nearby parks like the Mayanis Greenway, the Mayanis Park are too unsafe due to mountain biking, and to take that into consideration. So thank you. And so thank you all for your comments, for listening to all of the information we had to share, and then for engaging in this discussion. I think everyone's in agreement that it's a really valuable, well-loved space. You're really lucky to have it in town. And I think we can all agree we want to find the way to move forward with keeping it the way it is. And since change is inevitable in the world, just find ways to steward this site appropriately so it can continue to offer what people love about it, with just the improvements that are necessary to continue to enable those things. So like I said, our next steps are we're going to start working internally, drafting recommendations based on all of our analysis we've been doing and the feedback we're hearing. The public survey that's online, which once again is on the Parks Department website, on the Town of Greenwich's website, is going to be open until November 17th. So please participate in that if you have not already, and spread the word about it. And we're going to be capturing the results of those of the survey responses and formulating recommendations for the master plan based on what insight we gleaned from that survey as well. And the next meeting, which hasn't been planned yet, will be for us to share preliminary initial thinking about master plan recommendations, to hear some further feedback and discussion on those things. I don't think that we'll be at the stage where we share a draft master plan publicly or anything like that. I think it's going to be kind of in the midst of that process. We'll share kind of our initial thoughts publicly at a forum. And then from there, we'll wrap up the master plan. So that'll be in the coming months, and you'll hear about that when that meeting is planned. So we'll stick around for a while longer, and please stay if you want, and you can come talk to any of us, and we'll be here for a little while. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, we'll be around. So if you want to wait and have conversations, I'll be here for a little bit myself. And thank you, GZA team and park staff.
That's all right.
So I